You know, powerful, autonomous AI, it's not science fiction anymore. It's on the trading floor, and it's making huge financial decisions right now. So today, we're going to break down a brand new framework that's all about managing these new risks, and maybe, just maybe, preventing the next big systemic crisis. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at where these AI agents are actually working today. Then we'll get into the massive risk of them all starting to think alike, what's called a monoculture. From there, we'll dive into an innovative new blueprint for governance and its secret weapon, the Heterogeneity Score. We'll see how it all works in the real world and wrap up with what this means for the entire future of finance.
So first up, let's get one thing straight. We're not talking about some distant, maybe someday future. This kind of advanced agentic AI is already here, and it's working deep inside the financial system as we speak.
And look, we're not talking about small fry tasks here. These systems are building and rebalancing portfolios, they're executing trades, they're monitoring risk limits, and they're even making the call on credit applications and insurance claims. We're talking about high-impact, high-stakes jobs at the absolute heart of the economy. Okay, so if these incredibly smart AIs are everywhere, what's the big deal? Well, that brings us to the central danger that this whole framework is built to fight, a new, hidden kind of systemic risk called a monoculture.
Yeah, just think about that for a second. What actually happens when every single one of these AIs, maybe trained on similar data, using similar models, makes the exact same bad call at the exact same moment? The whole point of diversification is to avoid that, but what if the decision makers themselves are no longer diverse?
And here's the crucial difference. In a healthy, diversified system, risks are kind of spread out. One bad apple doesn't spoil the whole bunch. The total risk is just all the little risks added up. But with a monoculture, all the risks are linked. They're correlated. One mistake gets amplified and copied across the entire system, and the total risk just explodes. And there's some pretty scary math to back this up. In a normal system, the risk from n different agents sort of adds up in a straight line. But in a monoculture, where they all make the same error, that risk gets squared. The potential for a massive loss doesn't just add up, it multiplies on itself. It just goes through the roof. That is literally the recipe for a financial catastrophe. Okay, so how on earth do you even begin to manage a threat that big? Well, let's get to the solution. It's a really comprehensive new blueprint, and yeah, it's a mouthful, called the Finance-Grade Verifiable Governance Architecture, or let's just call it FG VGA. The big idea here is actually pretty brilliant in its simplicity. You build a wall between the rules and the actions. You have a control plane that sets all the policies and safety limits, and a completely separate data plane where the AIs are actually doing their work. That separation is what makes the whole system auditable and, most importantly, verifiable. So this whole thing is built on 5 key layers. You've got the policy plane, which is just the rulebook, the evidence plane, which creates a perfect, unchangeable audit trail for everything that happens. The attestation plane acts like a bouncer, making sure only approved AIs are in the club. Then you have the systemic plane, which is constantly scanning for that dangerous monoculture risk. And there's even a sustainability plane to keep an eye on things like computing resources. Now, inside that systemic plane, there's one piece that is a real game changer. It's the key innovation we're here to talk about, and it's designed to stop that AI groupthink in its tracks. It's called the Heterogeneity Score, or HS for short. You can just think of it like a diversity score, but for your AI models. The whole point is to give you one single, clear auditable number that tells you how differently your AIs are behaving, so you can stop them from falling into that dangerous herd mentality. So, how does it actually measure this stuff? Well, it's like a 3-part checkup for your AIs. First, it looks at what they actually do, their behavior. Second, it peeks under the hood at their internal models, basically how they're thinking. And third, it checks their sensitivity, how they react when you poke them with the same new data. It's a totally comprehensive exam for AI diversity. Okay, and this is where the rubber really hits the road. This isn't just some academic score. It has real, hard financial teeth. See, if your score is high, great, everything's normal. But as that score drops, as your AIs get more and more similar, the consequences kick in. First, an enhanced review. Then it gets escalated to the executives. And get this, you actually have to post more collateral. A low diversity score is tied directly to a real financial cost, which forces firms to take this seriously. So we've got the score, we've got the blueprint, but how does this all work in practice? How do you turn these big ideas into actual concrete controls that you can enforce?
The paper we're looking at uses this amazing analogy from, of all places, Swiss e-scooter regulations. See, they don't try to predict every single way a person could crash. That's impossible. Instead, they just cap the scooter's speed at 20 kilometers an hour. Why? Because they know that at that speed, the kinetic energy from a crash is below the level that causes critical injury.
And that idea translates perfectly to finance. Instead of trying to guess every possible way an AI can fail, you just set hard, unbreakable limits. You cap exposure, you cap position sizes, you cap the maximum loss allowed. The goal isn't to prevent every single mistake. It's to make sure that even the absolute worst-case failure is survivable, that it's contained and won't bankrupt the firm. All right, another really clever control is something called an evidence packet. Every single time an AI takes an action, it generates this little digital receipt. It's cryptographically signed and machine-readable. It creates a perfect, unchangeable audit trail that documents exactly what the AI intended to do, who approved it, and what happened. It's accountability, built right into the design.
Okay, so let's pull all of this together. What's the real end game for a framework like this? It's really about changing the fundamental way we think about risk in a world that's going to be run by AI.
So if you remember nothing else from this, remember these 3 principles. 1. Governance can't be about human checklists anymore. It has to be verifiable by machines. 2. AI monoculture isn't some vague fear. It is a real, measurable risk that you have to actively manage. And 3. We can finally take the black box of AI and turn it into a transparent system of accountable, evidence-based actions. Which brings us to a final, really provocative question. We started this whole conversation by talking about agentic AI as this huge new risk. But with robust, verifiable controls like the ones we've just discussed, could it actually be the opposite? Could a well-governed system of diverse AIs become our single greatest safeguard against human error and market madness? That's the future this framework is trying to build.